open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived by those present, and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. And with that, we will get, two things. We're gonna go a little out of order. So we are going to get the financial update. Okay, so we're gonna get the financial update from you.
Oh, you wanna do that first? Good, I can go home and have supper. Alrighty. The first report that you have is Mark 6A1, which is your income statement from your operating account. As you can see, there was only bank interest as deposits this month, and there were some disbursements that were on previous warrants. The ending balance for the month is $2,115,720.54. If you keep going to the next 6B1, this is your, this was classified as like the parking garage account. As you can see, there was a large deposit, which was parking garage receipts for $17,400. I don't know why, at one point BBP stopped paying the RDA. That $17,400 is actually 4 months worth of revenue. You guys get $4,350 per month. And a small amount of bank interest in that account for an ending balance for the month of $183,859.40. The next report is the warrant for the month, 6C. Number 1, there is 4 bills on the warrant. And I don't know what you want me to do. There were a couple bills that came in later that we usually pay in that month, which are attorney fees. I can add it on to the warrant and get it to you. There, I think it's about $3,000 or $4,000. That's your determination. If you want to just keep the warrant the way it is, or if you want to change that. There are 2 bills on there for group insurance commission, which is health insurance and dental insurance for people who have retired, and you have 2 tax bills for parcels that are actually in the town of Freetown. That we get on a yearly basis. The other report that you have, which is Mark 6D, is your accounts payable register. You have 5 bills on that, 5 invoices. Fall River Retirement Board is your annual appropriation. That doesn't have to be paid until October. 3 bills for Harriman that I'm working on that account. I've put those bills on hold because there's some discrepancies in the accounting, and then there's that last invoice for Jobs for Fall River. I've contacted Mr. Fiola twice this month in emails requesting that we get backup for that bill. As of today, I still haven't gotten the backup, so I'm just waiting on that to go through that. And your last financial report is something that I put together concerning what we've talked about in the past of taking some of your money and putting it into certificates of deposit. Right now, your bank balances are there of $415, total $2.2 million, almost $2.3 million. What I suggest is in the future getting rid of that parking garage account and merging this all into one account, and then transferring out maybe $1.2 million, which would give you a cash balance of about $1,099,579. Take that $1.2 million and put that into certificate of deposit, which would earn you more interest. Currently, right now, on your smaller account, the parking garage account, you're earning 0.10%, which is bringing you in about $14.80 a month.
Getting rich.
On your other account, it's at 0.85%, bringing you in $1,542. So monthly, you're bringing in about $1,557, and your 10-month total is $15,573.40. You'll probably ask me, why did I choose a 10-month total? Most of the CDs that I looked at, different banks had a 10-month, 12-month special. So if you did the 1.2 million at 10 months at 2.47, which is an APY of 2.50, and that's right now current interest rate at Bay Coast, that would bring you in on that CD $2,471.80. And then if you left the remaining money in your high earning checking account at 0.85%, you'd bring in another $775.85. So you would bring in a total of $3,247.65 monthly, instead of what you're currently bringing in, which is $1,557.34. So you'd be earning another $1,600, almost $1,700 in interest by doing that change. And over a yearly basis, with that new makeup, you'd be bringing in $32,731.61 instead of $15,573.40. So you'd be earning an additional almost $17,158 by moving it. I picked the Bay Coast Bank one for the only reason that you already have all your accounts are at Bay Coast. A lot of if you were to move it into other banks, they require you to opening up savings accounts and stuff. So, you know, you don't want to open up a lot more accounts. You know, the only issue that you still have is that the money is only insured up to $250,000. So it's up to you what you want to do. I just figured I'd give that out to you, and you know, figure out what you want to do with the future.
Great.
What is it that we need to do, just make a motion to execute that plan?
I think so. I mean,
I'll
we've
make a motion.
been talking about it for a few months now. May as well earn a little bit more money, you know, for
The only thing that concerns all of us is leaving all that money that's uninsured with the same bank. Does it make sense to split it up a little, you know, I mean, the chance that nothing's gonna happen, but it's happened
the
before.
money's been with the same
Yeah.
bank, sitting in the same
Yeah.
non-interest checking
Yeah.
account for years and years and years.
No, I agree.
So I'm not quite sure.
The chances of a Bay Coast Bank, which is probably over $1 billion now, I think, of having financial difficulties, God won't strike me down, is probably nil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, there is some risk. I'm not going to say that you probably would be written up in an audit. But if you want to have 8 or 9 different banks up to the 250, we can also probably speak to Bay Coast to see if they would. Sometimes you can take additional security on your money in the bank, so they might be able to offer.
Whatever the board feels, I'm fine with whatever the board.
I'm ready to make a motion to execute the plan as described by Mike. So
I'll
I'm
second that.
comfortable with the numbers. I think
Me
it's a
too.
no-brainer.
Second that. All in favor?
Aye.
If you can
All
move
right,
forward
yeah,
on
it's
that.
something that I'm going to need your
Great.
assistance with,
Whatever
so
you need.
I'll be in contact with you.
And I'll come down and meet you. Great, thank you. And I think that, did you want us to vote on the warrant? Because I would make a motion to accept the warrant as scheduled and to add in those couple late that came in for
Awesome,
Coughlin's office.
okay.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'll add them in and get the warrant to you tomorrow.
Great, thank you very much.
Cool.
The next item on our agenda is the Economic Development Director position. And I believe that Caroline Wells is here. So if you could please come sit next to Kathy Ann. Very excited to have you, so thanks for coming. All the board members have received your resume and all your references. And obviously, the subcommittee did recommend that you come forward. So we're going to operate basically in the same manner. I'm going to ask you the questions that the subcommittee asked. And then when we're done, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself that you feel that we didn't cover here.
Okay.
And then if any board members do have any questions. So if you would please tell us about your background and why you feel you're well suited for this position.
Okay. So I'm at a point in my career right now where I've done a lot of things over the last 20 years, and I've kind of going back to the things I enjoy most. And I started in redevelopment right out of graduate school. I went to Chapel Hill. I was actually, before that, studied archaeology. And at that point at which I graduated, there were no jobs in archaeology, and none that paid particularly well. And I felt like I needed some different skills. I was working in historic preservation at that point and working in some adaptive reuse projects. And I was interning at the city of Greensboro while getting my master's degree in regional planning. And I was really lucky then. They put me through a lot of different education modules on finance, development finance, different types of grant sources, community development block grants, and working with the community, working with dispute resolution, conflict negotiations. So it was a very fortunate time for me, and I enjoyed the work that I was doing, such that I didn't really ever want to go back into preservation or archaeology. I just wanted to move forward with planning. So I worked there up until about 2005. My husband at that point got a job as the planner in Barrington, Rhode Island. His family has a house in Maine, and we would drive through this area on the way up to Maine. And my parents are from Massachusetts. They're actually from the Berkshires. So we liked the New England coast, and we decided to move up here. So I had a hard time finding a job for a while. I also had a small daughter at that point. The recession was the housing bubble was sort of moving in, and I didn't have a network up here. So you'll see a little bit of starts and stops in my resume at that point. But my daughter was still pretty small too, so I wasn't really kind of full in on working full time at that point. But I had a lot of great experiences working on some really great projects around the state, learning about planning up here. I eventually landed in Warren, Rhode Island, and I worked there for, from 2008 to 2015. So that's quite a long period of time in which I did brownfield remediation in parks, a lot of infrastructure planning, bike paths, kayak trails, green infrastructure projects on Water Street, which is where the park meets the town beach. And economic development projects. I worked with the Hope in Maine Culinary Business Incubator, essentially from beginning to end. I had a person come in my office interested in finding space. I showed her a town-owned building that had been abandoned for a few years, and we just worked together. It was not a known type of business structure to actually have an incubator devoted to people who want to start food businesses, so we had a lot of educating of other people and ourselves to do. But we eventually amassed quite a following, such that when the project went to public referendum, which it had to do in order to dispose of a publicly owned building, we had 500 people show up and almost unanimously vote to sell the building. And the incubator now is working. It's has markets every week or so now, and it's graduated about 170 businesses. That was a great experience. I was also doing development plan review, which is something I had not had experience before. So in my redevelopment role, I was sort of acting as a developer, going before planning and zoning boards with potential projects. This time I was on the other side, I was on the permitting side. So I actually understood the planner's perspective as a project goes through the permitting process. And that's the role I have now and have had since. But it kind of takes me away from what I really like, which is to see projects from inception through design, through execution, and then to see them sort of go off on their own and become their own things. This week I actually went back and looked up some of my old projects in Greensboro, like South Elm Street, which is where I wrote a $2 million grant application and an EPA brownfield application. It was just a blown out mill surrounded by blighted land at that point, about 10 acres of blighted land. And here we are, 10, 15 years later, and a condo developer just is investing $27 million now in that to build condos. So, it can be done. These industrial corridors, these places where people just think are forgotten and lost, and there's no hope. But there is hope. You just have to have that long vision for it. So, anyway, that's how I got here.
Thank you. Describe your experience in the field of economic development, specifically with job creation and job retention.
So, mostly it has to do with my work in Warren. So with the incubator, we were dealing with all kinds of new business people. Some of them were Johnson & Wales graduates with businesses of their own that just needed a place to go. Some people just literally didn't even know how to start a business, didn't know the legal foundations, the accounting. So what we had to do is create a program from soup to nuts for people who of various knowledge bases and various time frames. Many times this was a second or third job for some people, and have it so that it was really building a business from the ground up. So that took a lot of design work by me, by a lot of the board of directors for Hope in Maine. They have a boot camp, and they try and keep everything as low cost as they can. That gives everybody the ground level knowledge. We worked with Rhode Island's Commerce Department we got grants. And I also got community development block grants to help with business assistance, like inventory sort of things like that, grant assistance, because most of these people also were not high income. And so it was really understanding the particular type of clientele, what their needs were, and then designing programs around that. So that's the core of it.
Describe your experience with compliance and statistical reporting requirements associated with government programs.
Mm-hmm. So from redevelopment on, I've always worked with community development block grants, home funds, we've worked with bond funds, and each of them have their own requirements for reporting and their own budget development, all of the federal strings attached. So I've been literally in class educated on that and have worked with that throughout my career. And there is reporting statistics for each one of those types of funding. So that's just part and parcel of working with developable property.
Tell us about your responsibilities with budgeting. How many employees have you supervised at any one time, and describe your managerial style?
The most I have supervised is about 15. I think I've always had somebody to supervise. I mean, there may have been periods where it was in between employees, but I've always had a supervisory position right out of the gate. My approach is, I think anybody will say, is collaborative, and I think I said that in my screening. I just really like to work on teams, and I like to hear all of the ideas. If there's a decision that needs to be made and everybody's on the fence, I'm happy to make it. But I like to have all ideas out on the table and start, kind of weeding through and getting priorities and making decisions that way.
Describe your activities during your first day and your first week on the job.
So as I had said, I think the first day I would, as much as possible, like to amass all of the information that I need and contact lists, kind of map out what it is I need to know and prioritize what I need to know when. Probably would love to take a ride out to some places and get a closer look if that's possible on a first day, certainly first week. And then by the end of the first couple of days, certainly I'd like to have a calendar filled with people I need to know, people I need to meet with. That first day and that first week is really when you start building that framework that you're going to start moving the operation into. So,
what do you consider to be your biggest strength and your biggest weakness?
My biggest strength, I think, is that I'm a good communicator, and I can communicate on a broad base of media, speaking and creating media, web pages, print media, keeping people up to date, keeping people informed. I'm pretty accessible. I think I'm easy to find if people have questions. So I think just keeping the circulation of information, not just to a board, but to the public, is probably my strength, biggest strength, I think. My weakness is that I tend to be very impatient, particularly when things are not meeting deadlines that were previously set. And I think particularly in projects like redevelopment projects, that happens a lot. And so you have to have a pretty good accounting of where delays are and why things aren't moving forward. And maybe was it your perceptions or the what you thought was wrong, or is it somebody's performance on another end that's wrong? So.
Why do you want to leave your current position?
When I applied for this job, I think I was ready to make that change away from permitting and planning, from the permitting side, back to the development side. But it's not something I want to talk in the open about because it's public information, and that's still an ongoing situation. So.
What are your salary expectations, and when would you be available to start this position?
My salary expectation is about $115, which is, I think, a healthy but fair step away from my current salary. And I'm ready to start whenever anybody's ready.
So this time I'm going to open up to any board members. If any of the board members have any questions for her?
I do.
I do when you're done.
Go ahead, you
When-
go first.
Really?
Sure.
You both get it in.
I got one question, and I think you're perfect fit for the job, okay? And I did a
Thanks.
fair amount of research, as much as I could, on you, and I'm sure you researched us. And I know that there was one of your past employments that you left on, not the best of terms, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to just very, very briefly get it out there so that it's out there. Would you be willing to do that? I don't want to intrude on your privacy, but I think, sometimes it's better just throw it out there. Rather than later. Do you?
Yeah, well, let me say it in the way that I think is the best way I can. How's that? I was in a situation where I was working, everything was fine. I was questioning pay grades that people were being hired into with questions about gender. And I didn't get any answers, but I did get retaliation.
I noticed you were successful in it.
Well, I know it's not successful because we settled, and so it's not necessarily a victory. It's a draw, but it's a draw that I came away with satisfied, and I assume they did too. So
Enough said. I appreciate you explaining that.
well,
So
it's an
out
important
there.
issue, actually.
Yeah, and rather than come on down sometime, because I'm sure you've noticed the situation where we've been on a bit of a roller coaster the last 6
Sure.
months. And so there's certain factions that may say, well, this and that, we didn't really vet her well enough, and now it's out there.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
Okay.
And that's my only question. Thank you.
And the country's battling it every day.
Yeah,
There you go.
indeed.
Michelle?
I would like to preface my comments and questions just by stating that from the time I was appointed to this board, one of the things that I basically have demanded is open, honest discussion and disclosure. So I'm very happy you were able to address that. Because I believe we owe the community that if we're going to have any trust and if we're going to move forward, that's what we need. So, I appreciate your candidness. I think you basically have, but I'd just like a little more, you've obviously had many positions in many areas. So if you could just go a little further into why there were so many changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were, by looking at your resume, which I think is incredible, and I think you're a perfect fit for Fall River, I think you're what we need. You have the brownfield experience, you have grant writing experience, you've had economic development, you're just so well-rounded.
Thanks.
But again, in full disclosure, just to explain, because again, people are gonna say, ask questions, so.
Right. Well, and the days of people being at their jobs for decades, and especially in the current job market, so I think I sort of alluded to this, when I came to Rhode Island, I didn't have a network here. My network was in North Carolina. I knew nobody here. And my daughter was young, and so I wasn't really ready to commit to the 40-hour job at that point. And there wasn't really good, adequate childcare at that point. So I had some decisions to make. And then when we hit the housing bubble, there just weren't jobs, at least not with my particular experience for what I was working for. So I was opening myself up to other experiences, not just to get that experience, but because that's what was available. And so, I'm somebody who's very interested in everything, which has been fortunate for me. If it's tax revenue analysis, love it. If it's land disposition, love that too. There are a few things that bore me. But I would say that much of my job selection and mobility thus far has been out of necessity. So I moved up here, I had a small child, went through a divorce. I mean, so my financial situation was constantly changing, but my network was building. So I've been moving on up, and I'm glad.
Okay, I've also noticed in your experience that you were a principal planner for the state of Rhode Island in long-range transportation, which supposedly, we've been hearing this for a long time, but the governor's going to assist us in perhaps finally getting a rail system.
I heard,
Transportation to Boston, so that experience obviously is going to fit in with that. How do you think that you could enhance that perhaps?
So I think that places like Fall River are optimally positioned to take advantage of some of the trends that are, unfortunate in some ways, like climate change. We're looking at a lot of transit-oriented development projects and creating new projects ground up that are on transit station lines and keep our jobs and our housing and our transportation close together. That was the core of the LRTP, the Long-Range Transportation Plan that I was working on, and it's a goal of Rhode Island. I'm sure it's a goal of Massachusetts as well, because with climate change, everybody in cars all the time is just not working. So we have to think about making transportation publicly accessible to as many people as possible, as affordably as possible, and as close to proximity to jobs and housing as we can. So Fall River has some of these components, assuming that the line comes in, assuming that it's a robust line and not just a connection that's not particularly well funded or the ridership isn't supported. I think you have a lot of the pieces in place. You have the potential for a really vibrant downtown, you have the potential for housing, you have the potential for job location, and this line, I mean, that's the recipe. That's the recipe for a lot of places going forward that maybe had a harsh industrial past, but that's where the future is, so.
Now, another concern I have is we have a large population that is older, very on small fixed incomes. Obviously, anytime a city moves forward, it becomes more expensive. How would they fit? What would we do to ensure that the two components can work together?
Well, I think that they need special attention. They probably need their own planning effort because you're right. If some sort of gentrification happens, people on fixed incomes, regardless of age, are gonna be at the unfortunate end of that, unless consideration is built in on the front end. But I also think that I feel pretty confident that you have leadership within the city itself that you can convene to go to hash out, okay, what are our opportunities, what are our threats, how are we going to build viability so that people can basically age in place, they can age in Fall River and do so comfortably. But I think that's a planning effort that needs to happen.
Excellent. And my last question would be, I'm sure you're very well aware of our waterfront and downtown urban renewal plans that are on the horizon, and you've had expertise in that. What is your vision for Fall River within that?
Well,
if you have one, it might not even be a fair question at this point.
yeah, it's not that I have a vision. It's more that I want to hear everybody else's vision. I mean, there are people who have spent their entire lives here who are generational, residents of this place. So I live in Barrington, and I grew up in Florida. So I mean, while I can help you from the technical perspective, this is your vision, not mine. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren?
Yeah, I just have one question. Michelle brought up your past experiences and how you basically moved up the ladder. What can we expect? Well, what type of commitment can we expect from you at this point in your life? And I might be a little unfair because no one knows the future.
Right.
Would you consider long-term?
Yes, as long as we're all happy, you're happy with me and I'm happy with you, then there's no reason why the relationship can't continue. So.
Joe?
So I did look through the resume, the letter that you provided, Kara, and the reference letters, and I was extremely impressed with all of that. I have one question only. What type of resources do you need to be successful managing all of these projects that we have open? So I'm certain that you looked through the job posting that has all the essential functions, and they are, I believe, 10 bullet items there. You also are fully aware of the urban renewal plans that we have downtown, waterfront, the city pier, and also a little bit over 90 acres of land that we have at the biotech park that is in desperate need of development. So a lot of projects.
Right.
These are pretty big projects. And I believe that the feeling here, the mood in the city is that we are stalling some of these projects from going into execution mode. So we need someone to come here, kind of running and get these projects going into implementation mode. What type of resources will you need? Because you fully understand that you will be the only staff member under the Redevelopment Authority.
Yes.
So I struggle a little bit with that. I fully understand that under Mass General Law, you can tap into city resources, and I hope that you will. I hope that we will tap into those resources because we need to work together in this city to make these projects come to fruition.
Right.
So can you just tell us a little bit about how you will tackle these projects, how you will manage them, how you will get the resources that you need to be successful?
Yeah, so the job description is, it's a lot. And I think that part of it is that we have to be as open as we can about prioritizing. I mean, what is most important to you? Because I'm not going to sit here and promise you that I can achieve all of these things, tomorrow. We can set our priorities and we can try to achieve them as you want to see them fulfilled. And part of that is communicating why things are not. I mean, people often in government, they assume if they haven't heard from you, then you must be doing nothing. And that's not, when you work in government, of course, your day is so full of so many things that communication sometimes falls on the wayside when it shouldn't. So I think keeping it before the public, if something looks like it's delayed, it shouldn't be because something's not happening. It may be that you're waiting on some tests to come in or you're waiting on a contract to be executed. There should be good reasons why things aren't moving forward. But to get to your point on resources, this sounds like if you really want to achieve everything in that job description, it's an all hands on deck kind of thing. And understanding in the first couple of weeks who those resources are, where the gaps are, that maybe some resources are not there that we need. That'll be, I think, the biggest point of order is creating the prioritized list of what's the most important things to get done, and what could maybe wait a little bit longer, because that's just how it's going to get done.
Thank you. I fully understand that priority is key. But we have many people that want everything to happen.
I know. Yeah, you can't please everybody.
I understand that.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
A follow-up, because Joe brought up an unbelievably critical point, I think. In the past jobs that you've had, or you have now, what kind of resources did you have as far as clerical staff, office staff? Because, as Joe said, we've got a very, very thin operation and somewhat, and I guess since he brought it up, I kind of have the same concerns. There's nobody to call back in the office and say, do this and do that and do that. You're kind of going to be it. At least from the outset. And I think you probably just got to...
I've more or less done that before, though.
Okay.
I just not quite on this scale.
Right.
I will admit that this is a much bigger scale than in the past.
Right.
So I've often been I've had a clerk, or I've had a community development block grant person who's a little more specialized but doesn't really do planning. And so when you have staff, they have their own roles. You can't just throw anything at them.
Right.
So in the past, what has helped me, I think, is having an understanding of whose strengths are where. And that isn't always about the position. It's often about the person. Some people are just really good negotiators, and some people are just really good at fostering good student work or fostering good nonprofit work, so that they can at least, maybe you can get some pro bono design work and get a project or get a grant based on that. It's kind of being the conductor of a symphony of people who each have their own sort of talents and niches, and you're just trying to make it all work together. I've
So,
had
yeah.
to do that before, but just
Yeah.
not, this will be on a completely new level.
Because I think the
so.
way I understand it, at least from the outset, you know, you'll go into your office and close the door, and there's nobody else around, it's you.
Yeah.
You know, to get it done, and you know, I just want to make sure you understand that, it's not. there's not a
I
whole lot of
understand
back-
that.
yeah. Okay.
At least in the beginning,
Yeah, at least in the
anyways.
beginning, yeah.
This is the beginning, right. I just have one final question. Do you have one, Joe, before?
I just want to make a quick comment if I could. So the way that I see this model, and again, this is very new to us, and I'm a little bit hesitant, but looking optimistic, trying to be optimistic about it. But the way that I see it is, in order for this model to work and for you to be successful, there has to be a strong partnership with the city, with the administration, with the resources that the city
Yeah.
have to offer. And again, are you willing to give it all to work with the city to
Sure.
do what we need to do to make these projects come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, that's the blood in the veins. I mean, it's not going to work if you don't have your full government on board. So, absolutely.
Thank you.
I wouldn't try without it.
I think he stresses that and says that with concerns because of our history.
Yeah,
You know, so
yeah.
Not necessarily anything, moving forward, but maybe from the past history. And, my question for you, right now the economy's good, people are expanding, people are putting additions, we've got people coming in, job creation, job retention. Do you see yourself as that person if we look at the cyclical 7-year cycle, we're not far off from where maybe we might dip into that recession mode and fall back where people aren't spending any money? Are you confident enough in your abilities that as you as a person, because we don't know you, are still gonna be out there pounding the pavement on behalf of the Redevelopment Authority and still knocking on the doors even when, there's not much out there?
Yes, but I might want to re-strategize for a new economic climate and figure out which doors are better to be knocked on than others.
Right, but
So,
at least you can bring that to the table.
yes.
And at least, but you feel confident enough that, you can forge through the good and the bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we
that's-
all have to.
It is,
Yeah.
but some people, might not want to pound the pavement and keep at it when
Yeah, I know.
everybody, as a government, are wanting to see results.
Yeah, I understand. It's hard. There's no question when a recession hits hopefully, God knows it won't hit like the one we just had, but, people are just pessimistic, and it's getting people to look past it, which is the hardest thing, but it's also the most important thing. This too shall pass. Let's think beyond this, But I will.
I think, I don't have any further questions. Does the board?
I'm good.
Thank you very much for coming and
Thank you.
speaking with us.
Thank you.
And joining us this evening. I have one thing that I'm gonna kind of skip to, because we're then gonna go into executive session with coming out. But one thing on old business is Forth has done preliminary surveying out there. And so we were thinking they're not quite ready to present anything to the full board, but they just wanted to sit down maybe with a couple members, talk about some depth stuff they found. And so I didn't know if we wanted to form a subcommittee to meet initially with Forth a couple times to talk about the city pier. Some of it had to do with the water. They found some
Yeah, they
objects in
sent
the water.
me some things, they found quite a bit of sunken
Sunken stuff,
They-
debris,
yeah, they
so,
didn't anticipate
um,
finding
I know that
good size stuff.
we're all busy. I'd be more than happy to sit on it if
I would
another
do it.
member,
Yeah, I'd be glad to,
Bob,
yeah.
would like to.
I can team up with Bob
Great.
as long as we manage to
Yeah.
do this on a weekend.
I can do it, whatever's convenient for you.
Okay.
Perfect,
All right, so
We need two.
we only need 2.
okay,
All right, so I'll be a backup, just in case one of you can't make it.
fine.
So we'll do a
Perfect.
subcommittee to sit with Forth a couple times prior to them giving us the full presentation to the board. Or if I can attend and not say anything, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Will Forth be available on weekends? I
I'm not
really
quite sure if
don't.
Forth
Karen,
will be
if-
available
if-
on weekends.
Mike
If you
would
want to
know
be
about
part
it.
of this subcommittee, I'll exit and you get.
Karen, how many
into it.
meetings do you expect? Just one or two?
Just 1 or 2, right, Mike?
Yeah, he's got some
just 1 or 2.
preliminary plans that
Yeah.
when I spoke to him, some preliminary ideas on paper, and he said it works better, instead of doing it all encompassing with the entire board, to have a subcommittee So, I mean, I'm assuming that he'd be willing to get together anytime.
Okay.
Whatever
Would
that-
weekends, would they be?
I don't see a problem with maybe a Saturday or something like that. I
So why
mean,
don't we find the answer to that, and then we'll see,
we can
Joe,
definitely.
when
you or I.
we can, you or I.
Okay,
Yeah, so
that's
just
fine.
schedule a meeting,
Yeah.
check with Karen, we'll send a couple of board members.
Do we need a motion to that?
I don't think you need to create a formal subcommittee.
No, what's that?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So you'll reach out to them?
I'll reach out to him,
And then we'll
I'll
see
pick
who's
some, get
available
some
to me
dates.
out of the three of us. The next item on the agenda is proposed executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and/or conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel for the Economic Development Director position pursuant to Mass General Law C-30A, 21A2. And can I also incorporate
Yeah, we might as well do the other two, we'll go into one executive session for all
Okay.
3 items.
to review and approve executive session minutes for April 10th, 2019 pursuant to Mass General Law 30A, 21A7, and to review and respond to open meeting law complaint pursuant to Mass General Law 30A, 21A1, filed by Patrick Higgins.
So on those 3, we need a roll call vote, we need a determination that we're gonna return to open session.
We will return, yes.
And there is no findings on any of those 3, so just a roll call vote to return.
Okay, Kara O'Connell,
Yes?
Robert Smith,
Yes.
Michelle Dion,
Yes.
Laurie Branco,
Yes.
and Joe Olivera.
Yes,
And do we need a roll call vote to return to open session?
we'll do that in the executive
open session.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I make a motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.